Wasn't planning on starting out the rip with a burp, but that's how it happened. I'm sorry, freaks.
Keeping it consistent.
Oh, what a week! Big news
Crazy
week
week.
here in the world of Bitcoin and the overarching cryptocurrency space. The privacy wars have been escalated significantly this week. We're going to talk all about it, but first, how many crashes did you see at the Motor City Grand Prix?
There's a Music City Grand Prix.
Music City,
Uh,
excuse me,
it was
not
fucking
Memphis.
baller. I don't know if people can see my hat, but that's the hat I'm wearing today. There was a bunch of races all through the streets of Nashville. A really insane course, very tight course, and there was a lot of fucking crashes. I think the main race there was races all Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but the main race was 26 drivers, and I think by the end of the race, 10 were out because of crashes. So almost 50%. Fucking
Almost,
crazy.
yeah. Yeah, it looked like a good event. You sent me a video of where you were sitting, and it was a tight corner. I don't know how
Yeah,
people do that.
intentionally picked the really tight fucking S curve. But it was crazy. I mean, one of the coolest races was they had these like monster truck races. They pull on the same track, which is a street track, as I said. They like pulled jumps onto they put these big steel jumps on. So the monster trucks have to go over the steel jumps while they're racing at like 120 miles an hour or whatever they're racing at. And they're allowed to bump each other too. So that was pretty fucking crazy. And like one of the kids was the guy who came in second or third was 13 years old, so he couldn't. He probably had his like mom drive him to the race, but and then he got into a monster truck to drive 120 miles an hour through this fucking track. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a really cool event. And I mean, it's crazy because it's since it's a street course, like they didn't clean up the next day, so I just like drove. I was like late to the park, and I just drove the whole track with the stand still up in my truck, which was fun. I enjoyed that. It was a good weekend. It was a really good weekend. I will say that consulting with Bitcoin conferences and helping run large events has kind of broken me in both positive and negative ways when I go to these large events. But they ran it fucking fantastic. It was a very clean event.
And it's building all these conferences, just looking around, just critiquing all the events or learning from them as well.
Yeah, I'm like I'm like buying a beer. I was like, this concession was managed fantastic. Look at this great position for it. And I was only online for a minute, and the transaction went really smoothly.
That was speaking of Grand Prix, is the Austin Grand Prix for F1 last year. That was the one thing they need to improve is the concession stands.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I was thinking of. Like, this was night and day. I mean, you remember we were waiting online for like 40 minutes for an overpriced beer at the F1 in Austin, and this was just you can get it anywhere you want in a minute. Super easy. Good food everywhere, easy to get. Good sight lines in the stands.
Logistics people, they're important when you're throwing an event, and they're important when you're building distributed peer-to-peer cash systems, as we found out this week. We're going to jump into the big news of the week, which is the fact that the Treasury Department sanctioned Tornado Cash, which is a smart contract on Ethereum that allows people using Ether to get more privacy. We'll jump into full details of that after we get to Clark's dashboard. Currently, the price of Bitcoin, according to Clark's dashboard, is 24,230 cuck bucks. One cuck buck is going to get you 4,127 sats. The Bitcoin market cap is currently $463.2 billion. We are at block height 749,015. We have not had a difficulty adjustment since we last met here last week. That was right after the previous adjustment. We are currently 937 blocks away from the next adjustment, which is estimated to be on August 17th. So that's next Wednesday. Right now, blocks are coming in at 9 minutes and 38 seconds on average since the last retarget. So it's looking like we'll have a 3.8% upward adjustment as of right now. Samurai Whirlpool keep chugging along. I wonder if the
New
news
all-time high.
has pushed people towards Whirlpool. It's currently sitting at 5,597.28 Bitcoin. That's an unspent value of 135.7 million. And it's flying through the 5,000s. It treaded along through the 4,000s. Took a few months to go from 3,999 to 5,000, but it's chugging through the 5,000 Bitcoin range now. And again, this is a good segue into the news of the week, which is there has been a massive escalation in the privacy wars. Like I mentioned, the Treasury Department sanctioned Tornado Cash, which again is a smart contract on Ethereum that allows people using Ether to get more privacy. There was a lot of astonishing things that happened in the wake of this. You had Infura and Alchemy basically make the RPC calls to Tornado Cash unusable. You had GitHub pull the accounts of the developers who were contributing to this open source project. I think that's important to mention. It's an open source software project that is code at the end of the day. We're seeing that Circle, which runs USDC, which is one of the most widely used stable coins out there, is complying with the sanctions and has begun blacklisting anybody who's touched Tornado Cash. Coinbase is helping them out with that as well. That's beginning to affect some of the DeFi protocols on Ethereum. I believe I saw earlier today MakerDAO is having some problems because of the blacklisting from USDC. And there was another app, Oasis app, that is not giving people access to their wallets because they touched Tornado Cash at some point in time using Ethereum. Matt, you are our privacy guru, our privacy fighter, our freedom fighter on the privacy end. What do you take from all this?
First of all, before we get started here, everyone should follow their local laws, including sanctions. This is obviously pretty massive news. I did have the pleasure of having Tony and Seth on Dispatch yesterday to talk about it at length. We went into it for about 2 hours and the implications of it. So if you're interested in a deeper dive, just search Zillow Dispatch in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. But let's dive into it. I mean, first of all, I think a good place to start is, why is privacy important? Why is privacy a part of this whole Bitcoin conversation? And to me, the way I like to frame it is, privacy is required to have freedom. And why is privacy required to have freedom? Because if people have information on you that you haven't chosen and consented to give to them, they can use that information to control you. So privacy is required for freedom. And then freedom is required for wealth. You can't be wealthy unless you're free, because if you're not free, then it's not your money in the first place. They can just put a gun to your head and take it from you. So when I think about these systems, and when I think about the value prop of Bitcoin, being able to selectively reveal, what financial information people have on you is integral to the whole Bitcoin experience and the Bitcoin movement. So this specifically is an Ethereum privacy tool. For Bitcoiners, you can kind of think of it like CoinJoin. It is non-custodial, like CoinJoin is. CoinJoin's collaborative transactions, as a lot of the freaks know. And it's actually probably less centralized than, like Whirlpool and Wasabi. So with Whirlpool and Wasabi, they use a centralized coordinator model. So the coordinator can't isn't able to connect your inputs and your outputs. So you have privacy from the coordinator. It's a blinded coordinator, and the coordinator is not able to steal your funds. Now, there's a nuance there that there's something called a Sybil attack, which is an active attack against users seeking privacy. And in Whirlpool and Wasabi, the coordinator could still Sybil you. So you're trusting that the centralized coordinator isn't doing an active attack against you. But the way they're set up, they're blinded, so they can't see the inputs and outputs unless they're actively attacking you. Now, with Tornado Cash, it's a smart contract. And you send ETH, USDC, wrapped Bitcoin, or other assets into Tornado Cash. And then it's basically like a Zcash sidechain is like a way to think about it. You enter this liquidity pool, and then when you would withdraw, the anonymity set is equivalent to, you know, the amount of people that are in there, right? So if there's 2,000 people in there, then, you know, your privacy is 1 in 2,000. Tornado Cash has been wildly successful. So like when we talk about the volumes of Whirlpool, like the liquidity in Whirlpool right now is, what'd you say in the beginning of the day? It was like 150 million or something like that?
136, I believe.
136 million. Tornado Cash had over $7 billion go through it. So significantly higher volumes, which is probably the reason why it was targeted before Bitcoin-centric systems were targeted. They took down the GitHub. Not surprising. We've seen that happen before. As soon as Microsoft bought GitHub, they within a few weeks, they had banned all Iranian accounts because of sanctions. What was a little bit more surprising is the main devs for Tornado Cash, they actually deleted their accounts too and deleted any projects that they were maintaining separate of Tornado Cash at the same time. Now, GitHub is a centralized front end on Git. You can actually use Git in a self-hosted way. It was designed to be used in a self-hosted way. Now, GitHub is more convenient. You're able to easily see pull requests and issues and different things that people are talking about all in line. It's almost like a social media platform at this point, like a LinkedIn for developers. But you can do all of this stuff in a self-hosted way. So I think one of the reoccurring themes here that should be highlighted is when we're talking about privacy and security, it's usually a convenience versus privacy and security trade-off, right? And I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with using more convenient options, if possible, on that trade-off balance. But when we end up in situations where you have very adversarial environments like this, then you start to see people move away from that convenience side of the trade-off balance and over more to the security and privacy side, the more sovereign, robust side. So what I expect to see here is, so the smart contract on Tornado Cash's smart contract still going. The front end for the website's down. There's another importance here of being able to use your own node, like the main hosted node providers on Ethereum. It's very hard to use your own node on Ethereum. They haven't prioritized that. They're blocking access to Tornado Cash, so you need to use your own node. But the smart contract is still running. There's so much here to unpack. I think this is the first time that a smart contract or a tool that wasn't like directly controlled by humans has been sanctioned rather than an individual or a corporate entity. So that's a big thing. And I think a key here is, and we've talked about this many times, is that I think, private Bitcoin usage is protected by both the First and the Fourth Amendment. And the First Amendment is free speech, and code is speech. And actually, there are some cases that say money is speech too in America. And the Fourth Amendment states that we shouldn't be subject to warrantless search and seizure. So I think the combination of the two actually protect us, but we can't rely on laws to protect us. There will be many unjust rulings, unjust laws. We should operate under that expectation. And then the last thing, I guess, out of all those things is so since then, there's been some people that have been sending Tornado Cash to all these different public Ethereum accounts, because Ethereum culture has been very public facing, not really privacy focused. So there's all these Ethereum addresses. They call them accounts. There's a interesting aspect here with Ethereum, that Ethereum uses this account based model. Bitcoin uses something called a UTXO based model. So we talk about a lot on the pod. If you when you receive Bitcoin, you should not reuse addresses. You should do a new address every time. And each of those addresses is a different UTXO. So in your wallet, it's like you have a bunch of bills that are Bitcoin of different amounts, and your wallet is basically choosing, if you're not choosing yourself, which bills to use to make a spend. With Ethereum, it's essentially like one reused address per user by default. That's linked to all their token history, all their financial transaction history that they've used with that account. And they have no coin control. So it should be interesting to see all of a sudden any of those accounts that have touched Tornado Cash in the history of Tornado Cash are now getting flagged by different centralized providers in the space, whether that's OpenSea or their quote unquote DEX, DIDEX. Like there's a bunch of cases so far, and we're going to see that with the regulated services as well, like the Coinbases of the world and stuff like that. They're getting auto flagged based on having any kind of connection to Tornado Cash. And a lot of times in these situations, it's like one step away. Like if I send car ETH, which he should just immediately disown me. He's like, why are you sending me ETH? But I send car ETH and then he sends it to Tornado Cash, then maybe my account gets flagged too, even though he sent it after I sent it to him. So we see similarities there with what we've seen on the Bitcoin side, which is when you're interacting with regulated services, some of them will block UTXOs that have some kind of history connected to hacks or collaborative transactions or something like that. But the Ethereum ecosystem has so many projects that kind of are faux decentralized, that I think there's going to be a lot of people are going to learn which ones are actually censorship resistant and which ones have to comply with these regs based on that.
Yeah, we're already finding out rather quickly. And even if they're not directly using Tornado Cash, I mean, go back to like MakerDAO. MakerDAO is one of the most successful DeFi dApps on Ethereum, and I think the peg on DAI is suffering a bit right now because USDC is blacklisting all their coins in that particular project.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfect example, right? Is like so MakerDAO kind of pretends to be decentralized, right? The whole idea is that you have DAI, which is supposed to be this, quote unquote decentralized stablecoin, that's native. It's a native token, and it's backed by locked assets. And originally it was backed by a lot of ETH. But since then, it's really a mixed bag of stable coins. And primarily right now, it's USDC and then Tether. And these entities are centralized entities that are complying with local laws. They've always been that way. I don't know why anyone's fucking surprised. Tether, at least to a degree, is, kind of like a wildcat banking type of situation where they flout rules and stuff. There's kind of like black market dollars, but they even freeze stuff. USDC has frozen stuff in the past. So now everyone's acting all surprised that USDC froze money that was in Tornado Cash. The crazy thing here is, I guess people are finally waking up to it, is with a single basically executive order or whatever from the US government, whether that's Treasury sanctions or something like that, all USDC that's backing Maker could be frozen in a heartbeat, can be completely made worthless in a heartbeat. That's all it takes to take down that system. The question of if that's going to happen or not is up in the air. But and then on top of all of that, like the proof of stake switch, if that happens, complicates this whole thing even more. It makes it even obviously less censorship resistant than it currently exists, Ethereum. And you would think that this would be like a perfect timing wake up call for them to call it off. And it seems like Ethereum stakeholders are doubling down, which I appreciate because I don't really want them to call it off at this point. Like I want people to learn this lesson vividly. And I think the combination of this plus the Ethereum so-called merge to proof of stake should make a really fucking fascinating case study over the next 2 years.
Yeah, because if they merge, they get a proof of stake. A lot of the largest stakers on the network will be these regulated entities like Coinbase, Kraken, Lido. Even I believe that's a corporate structure. Uh,
Binance, FTX,
all the largest exchanges, and
BlackRock.
the U.S. Treasury goes and says, "Hey, you guys need to do this. You can't validate these transactions. They're going to be forced to comply." And
Yeah, so let's dive into that, Marty.
again, we want to be very clear. We're not advocating that anybody evade sanctions, but how do we prevent this type of attack from materially hurting Bitcoin? Like we mentioned earlier, there's many aspects to this attack as we described. I mean, pulling the accounts of the GitHub accounts of the developers, pulling the GitHub page of the project, like that's a social attack vector. So it was encouraging to see that there are teams out there working on Bitcoin tech, particularly Samurai, who has thought through this attack vector and is already well suited if GitHub ever decides to pull their repositories. They have self-hosted GitLab repositories that they're using and mirroring their GitHub activity on. So that's one way to protect against this. And then again, going back to the staking argument, once you change your consensus mechanism from proof of work validated by full node operators and secured by the Bitcoin mining industry to a proof of stake system, which is validated and secured by the largest stakeholders in the system, who are going to be the exchanges and all these regulated entities, you're not really going to have the ability to spin up a node and work around those entities, especially if you don't have 32 ETH, which is what is necessary to become a validating node, I believe.
So like the parabolic guy tried to hit me with I think he tried to hit me with the gotcha on Twitter, and he asked, what is the likelihood that Bitcoin transactions with a collaborative transaction history, the coin join history, get frozen and blacklisted? And I think that's an interesting perspective to kind of when these situations happen, even if they happen in shitcoin land, I think it's a very good time for learning experiences and learning from these issues. And that's a very interesting perspective. So first of all, as currently stands, I think most people agree that using collaborative transactions, you're not giving up custody of your funds. It's a native Bitcoin transaction, is perfectly legal in America. That might not be the case in the future. There might be a ruling in the future, but right now it appears that way. The second thing is we've already seen funds with certain history get blacklisted from regulated services like BlockFi, like Coinbase. We've seen that happen already. That is already the case. That is a risk you take if you decide that you want to use Bitcoin in a private way. We have never seen Bitcoin frozen. And for Bitcoin to be frozen, what needs to happen essentially is a sophisticated mining censorship attack. And what happens is if you have a majority of miners that are intentionally not including transactions in block, then they are effectively frozen. Now, Bitcoin has a built-in mechanism to try and mitigate that risk. And that mechanism is the transaction fee. So if miners aren't including your transaction, you increase the transaction fee. And if a miner somewhere in the world decides to include the transaction, you're included in a block and you can proceed on your merry way. Now, at that point, if malicious miners have an overwhelming majority of hash, they could not build on top of that block and fork out that block. And then you have this kind of game theory that's happening where they're hurting the fungibility of the token that they're basing everything off of, which is Bitcoin miners are heavily invested in Bitcoin, obviously. And they're potentially missing out on achieving their top line revenue that they could have in terms of mining rewards. So that's what protects us from censorship on the protocol level. Now, with proof of stake, we've long theorized, I have threads from like 2017 and shit, that a move to proof of stake will centralize validation onto regulated services, centralized parties that are staking for other people. And in that situation, it gets extremely fucking dangerous when you talk about protocol level censorship risk. These exchanges have shown in the past that they're easy to pressure and they will comply. And there's another mechanism with ETH that if you're a staker not going with the majority, there's something called slashing. I don't pretend to understand it to its fullest extent. They changed a lot of the details over and over again, but I promise you we will all understand it once proof of stake happens. If proof of stake happens, people are going to get a really good lesson on what the implications of this type of situation are, and that primarily is protocol level censorship risk.
Yes. And then bringing it back to like the Bitcoin mining attack vector. Let's say OFAC decides to throw anybody who's ever used Whirlpool, or they use input or output heuristics to find UTXOs that may have engaged in a collaborative transaction and put them on a list and send it out to all the mining pools and say, hey, do not include any of these transactions in any blocks that you build. Then it comes down to the unknown miners. Right now, the 10th largest entity, or unknown miners are considered the 10th largest entity in the Bitcoin mining space. They currently have 1.95% of the total Bitcoin mining hash rate.
It's larger than that because there's unknown miners that are mining with known pools as well that might switch in that situation, right? Because you don't, a lot of the pools you don't have to KYC for.
Yeah, but in terms of blocks that are mined by unknown entities, alongside pools, right now it's 1.95%. And that's the beauty of proof of work and the ability to switch your hash at a moment's notice to an unknown pool, or to just simply self-bind with some anonymity. You can have quick moves on the go as attacks pop up. And so with that, if playing down this this game theory situation again, all the largest mining pools that are regulated have public-facing corporations and leaders begin to sanction addresses, and it begins to affect the ability for people to get UTXOs included in blocks of transactions. You'll probably see a migration of hash go dark and then begin accepting those transactions in blocks. But in that case, in that scenario, again, it highlights just how robust we need to build this network. And Steve Barber tweeted out earlier today, even though mining is one of the best way to get to accumulate Bitcoin in a pretty private manner, there really aren't incredible privacy tools for Bitcoin miners specifically, particularly when they're receiving payouts from pools or trying to ensure that they're relatively private at the networking level of actually doing the mining and connecting to the internet and the Bitcoin protocol. And so I think this should be seen as an opportunity to really highlight where the pain points exist throughout the Bitcoin mining ecosystem, whether that's trusting too many regulated mining pools, how are miners, at-home miners, people that are mining under the radar, how their networks configured, their IP is going to be easily identifiable, and then therefore making you more easily identifiable. Who's using VPNs, who's mining over Tor. These are things that people really need to start thinking about as these privacy wars escalate.
If first of all, if you're a miner looking to improve your privacy game, Econo Alchemist has very good guides on his blog. I've also spoken to him and others at length on Sale Dispatch about it, but his blog is great. It's just econoalchemist.com. I think a big takeaway here is Ethereum and a lot of other networks basically built for a world of best case scenarios. And why do they do that? Is because on the trade-off balance, if you do that, you can get UX improvements, you can get performance improvements, you can get convenience improvements, right? And it's talking about, that trade-off balance, right? That convenience versus security trade-off balance. Bitcoin was built in the exact opposite way and continues to be maintained and improved in the exact opposite way, which is built for worst case scenarios all the way on the side of security and robustness in that trade-off scale with convenience. And as a result, it is way better suited for handling this type of environment. Like even, running a node, making it easy as possible, right? Easy and cheap as possible to run your own node privately and use your own node privately. The being able to easily and without permission mine on the network. And even on the GitHub level, there is a bunch of, Bitcoin Core is hosted on GitHub, the repo, but a lot of people have backups. There's other communication channels that are used to develop and maintain and improve Bitcoin. And they can be used in the future if necessary. So this should get. I think the optimistic take here is something that I've talked about a lot, which is everyone is going to get burned, and we're going to get increasingly burned. And as people get burned, as they touch the stove, they will learn that it's hot, and they will seek to improve themselves. So the key is to have the tools and the education ready for people as they learn the hard lessons the hard way, and just hope that as few people get burned as possible while still having that improvement made. So I think like as our toes are on the fire, as people are feeling the pressure, this is when the real improvements happen. And we've kind of just been in this honeymoon phase. I mean, if you talk about, if I was able to talk to young Matt when like I first got into Bitcoin, what he expected to happen over these last 9 years has been way rosier than young Matt expected. Like I thought all out state attacks were going to happen. And fortunately, Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem has been able to basically grow and strengthen and become more robust in essentially what is a honeymoon period. And it seems like now we're starting to hit the end of that gradual phase, and we're going to hit that suddenly phase of true adversarial environments when working in this space.
Yeah, the attacks are coming, freaks. I mean, we've been saying it for years. They should be expected. This shouldn't be surprising to anybody. But I think there's another interesting aspect of this Tornado Cash experience that I think we should go back to, which is this ETH whale spamming all of these very public figures with tornado or ETH from Tornado Cash. And so he's spammed Brian Armstrong, he's spammed Jimmy Fallon,
Puma,
the company, one of the Paul brothers, I think Logan Paul. And so then that gets into a really interesting conversation of, is the fact that the stuff is open source software that anybody can access? Yes, people have sanctioned things, but I think the guy who did this was trolling and trying to see if OFAC would actually go and like try to enforce sanctions on these individuals he sent 0.1 ETH to. But does this essentially create an example of the cost of enforcing these sanctions and these regulations being too high? Because simply you can sanction the smart contract, but then anybody can still access it because it's open source. And if they have access to a full node, they can do it and then spam everybody. Is the U.S. government going to go round up all these people that got ETH from Tornado Cash and begin bringing cases against them? I don't think so. And if that does happen, does it make these regulations ineffectual at the end of the day? I don't know, but it's interesting.
Okay, so there's a couple of things to break down here. First of all, as I said before, ETH uses an account-based system. Everyone has basically a static reused address that's connected to their full financial history. Like Bitcoin, no one can stop someone from sending them money, right? Unlike Bitcoin, there's a culture where people are attaching it to their ENS names and stuff and attaching it to their real identity. So it's super easy to figure out who is who. And they don't have coin control. So if someone sends you tornadoed ETH, you don't, when you go to make an ETH transaction, there's no way not to include that in your spend. Like it's automatically included in your spend. Now, when we talk about enforcement, it gets really messy really quickly. And why do I say that? Well, first of all, okay, I think we can pretty safely assume that Jimmy Fallon didn't go to Tornado Cash and withdraw ETH to himself. But really, there's no way for him to prove that he didn't. Maybe Jimmy saw that all the other celebrities were all receiving Tornado Cash ETH, and he was like, "Oh, this is my opportunity to withdraw some of my Tornado Cash ETH." Like, there's zero way for him to prove that he didn't send it to himself. And then the second thing is, enforcement isn't U.S. Treasury knocking on your door for most people. They might do that for a couple of people they want to make examples out of to get people to comply. What enforcement really looks like is anyone that's touched any of these sanctioned things or appears to have touched will get auto flagged on all these different services. You know, Jimmy Fallon might withdraw to Coinbase or try and use OpenSea, and his account will automatically get flagged and frozen. And then he's going to have to go through a weeks, months, years long process to try and get that account unfrozen. And if it's not Jimmy Fallon, he might not even get it unfrozen ever and just have his funds stuck. Right. So enforcement will be messy. Enforcement will not be done mostly by the actual regulators. It'll be done by all the different centralized entities that interact with all these things, all those services. And it's going to get messy as fuck. And that's one of the reasons why it'll be so interesting. And I will say, there was a tweet by a Monero guy that was just like, "I've been working in Monero for 5 years, and I'm just straight up embarrassed they got sanctioned before us." I've expected these types of situations to arise, and I expect people to improve their setups based on it and improve these protocols based on it. And as someone who doesn't interact with Ethereum at all, it is a little breath of fresh air that kind of the test case, everything is happening over there like arm's distance away. But it will get very interesting, and there'll be things that we don't expect. There'll be things that we do expect. There'll be confirmations of theories. There'll be new theories that are created. It's going to get very, very interesting, particularly with the proof of stake merge happening at the same time. And I hope we can all learn a lot from it. I think that we will be covering this topic over and over again on Rabbit Hole Recap. It will be a constant reoccurring type of case study as it unfolds.
Yes. It's, I mean, if you go back and listen to the first episode I ever recorded with Bitcoin Sign Guy, he had a pretty prescient line of thinking in that interview where I asked him what he means and all this, and he described them as this weird, amorphous, like nebulous regulatory shield for Bitcoin because they're essentially low-hanging fruits that regulators can go after and are much easier to have a profound impact on than something like Bitcoin. And so Ethereum going out and making these design trade-offs, picking usability over robustness and security, has essentially made them a low-hanging fruit for regulators where they can easily go and pressure these centralized entities to stop people from interacting with the network in a particular fashion, like they have with Tornado Cash. So yeah, like Matt said, this is a theme, a story that's only just beginning. It was a massive shot across the bow of the industry. Do not think that these types of things won't be coming to the Bitcoin ecosystem at some point in the future as well. And until that point comes, anybody who's building in the space, whether it be building wallets, building mining infrastructure, building mining pools, building privacy tools, the time to batten down the hatches, put your head down, and build is right now. You want to make sure that everything is as robust and usable as possible before the hornets come, the regulatory hornets come. And as Satoshi said during the WikiLeaks thing, we have kicked the hornet's nest, and they've been a bit slow for the first 13 years, but it seems like they're getting their house in order and coming after ours. So beware.
Yeah, I mean, I look. I expect there to be lots of pain here. The hope is really to reduce the amount of pain people feel, the amount of funds that are lost, and the amount of the lives that are turned upside down. And the key there is to be prepared ahead of time, both individually and on a network and protocol level, and on an app level. And so, like I was saying earlier, I think it's completely reasonable on the convenience versus robustness, security kind of trade-off balance to be a little bit more on the convenience side if we can get away with it. Right now, the predominant privacy tools rely on centralized actors. There are, obviously, it seems like at least on Samurai's side, they're taking a lot of precautions. They will fight it tooth and nail if there's issues. But ultimately, we need a fallback strategy. Right now, the closest thing to a fallback strategy on the Bitcoin privacy side we have is join market. It's not very easy to use because it's on that convenience versus robustness, security kind of. It's already all the way on the opposite side of the convenience side. There's some low-hanging fruit for improvements there. I mean, we do have a bounty out for an easy join market UI. But I would like to see just more privacy tools that don't rely on centralized actors, just in case we do need them. And, I personally will do what I can to support those tools, whether that's on the funding side, the education side, the exposure side. But yeah, this should be a wake-up call for a lot of people in both the Bitcoin and greater ecosystem. And I will say on a positive level, on the Ethereum side, it does seem like a lot of people have kind of just gotten smacked in the head with a bucket of cold water and are starting to wake up to it. There was a scenario to a degree where I thought like the anti-privacy voice would win out, and it does seem like there's a renewed focus there. So we'll see how that plays out. It should be interesting because a lot of the crypto lobbyists have been focused on, kind of shitting on Bitcoin. A lot of shitting on Bitcoin and proof of work, and like a lot of that money has been spent on protecting the ability to dump, non-regulated securities on retail. And maybe that money and that effort starts turning towards, protecting financial privacy, and I think that becomes a win for Bitcoin, rather than basically just wasted money. I mean, I don't think that securities regulations help anybody, period. But I also don't think that's a fight that I really care about. And hopefully this creates a renewed focus on the importance of financial privacy and protecting our constitutional rights in America.
Yeah.
But the Constitution is also a shitcoin.
Yeah, it is a shitcoin. But I was going to bring up the Bill of Rights, the first 5 amendments. I saw a tweet out there right before we went live from, I believe it was Jesse Posner. He tweeted out that technically cryptography, which is one of the most essential tools that these networks leverage, is protected by the first 5 amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Cryptography is speech. It is a munition at the end of the day. The 90s crypto wars sort of proved that. Third Amendment mandated cryptography backdoors are agents of the state in the home. You cannot have agents of the state forcing themselves into your home. Your data is your property at the end of the day. It is part of your home. The Fourth Amendment, as Matt mentioned earlier, cryptography bans are an unreasonable search and seizure with no due process. And then the Fifth Amendment, compelled decryption of cryptography violates due process as well. So, I mean, if, as Matt says many times, throughout these rabbit hole recaps, the Constitution is a shitcoin. But if there's any sense of justice and um, legalese that remains in this country, technically, if we are respecting the Constitution, cryptography and by extension Bitcoin should be protected by the first 5 amendments. That'll be seen. It will be seen if the federal government wants to respect the Constitution. They really don't like to do that these days, but there is a legal argument. Who knows with the Supreme Court that we have right now? They seem to be really trying to get us back to our constitutional roots, so maybe they'll step up to the plate. I think that's what's going to happen. I think whether it's tornado cash or some type of regulation that they try to thrust on Bitcoin at some point in the future, it'll just get taken to the Supreme Court, and that's where this whole debate will be settled at the end of the day, particularly here in the United States.
A boy can dream. I think another key aspect here that we need to just iron into people right now, because we have the opportunity to, is there's been a lot of people on Bitcoin Twitter that over the last months, years, have tried to make false equivalencies about tools that you can use on Ethereum with wrapped Bitcoin being Bitcoin tools. This shows why that is not the case. I've had people reply guy me multiple times with big following saying that the best way to use Bitcoin privately is with wrapped Bitcoin on Tornado Cash. This is why that is not the case. And that's because BitGo holds all the Bitcoin that are backing wrapped Bitcoin. And they were able to freeze it at will as soon as the sanctions happened. So it's not your keys. It's not your coin. That is not Bitcoin. You have a trusted third party there. And the whole point of Bitcoin was to remove that trusted third party. You shouldn't have to need a trusted third party to hold an asset for you to use it digitally. You should be able to have a native bearer token, and that is what Bitcoin is.
Yes. And while we're on the topic, before we segue to the next subject here, I think it is important to highlight this comment from our resident Tesla bull, full-time Bitcoin. At the mining pool level, there has been a pool that popped up, Lincoln Pool, that is very privacy focused, and they're incorporating pay-in payouts into their pool, which adds a significant increase in privacy for individuals who are mining to pools. So the pool pays out via pay-in. It gives you a layer of privacy there, so that's good to see as well.
Yeah, so just to unpack that just really quick, on most pools, you give them an address, then they automatically pay you out when it hits a certain threshold of a certain amount of Bitcoin. They'll automatically pay you out to that address. Obviously, that's a reused address, not great for privacy. What a lot of Bitcoiners that care about privacy, a lot of miners have done is they'll basically go in there and manually change it to a new address every time. Or not set it to auto payouts and just manually go in there, put a new address in, and withdraw. Obviously, if it's less convenient, less people will choose the private option. Most people will use reused addresses. Payonym, specifically BIP47, which is this protocol for a payment code that is a reusable payment code. If a service offers that, you're able to just put in that static string of letters and numbers, and every time a withdrawal is placed, that automatic withdrawal goes to a new fresh address. So you get that privacy benefit that's not going to the same exact address. Recently, Samurai for a while was like the only main player that had BIP47 support. Sparrow Wallet on desktop, on computer, Mac, Linux, Windows all offer it. So you can just download Sparrow Wallet, verify the PGP signature to make sure it hasn't been man in the middle. Download Sparrow Wallet, and then create a paynim there, create a BIP47 payment code, and then put that into your pool. In this case, Lincoln Pool offers it first, which is a small new pool. And then every time you withdraw, it'll go straight to your self-custody wallet with a new fresh address. And I just want to make one other distinction real quick. So paynims, BIP47. BIP47 is this protocol, like I said, fixed reusable payment code that creates a new address every time someone sends you a payment. Nyms is a centralized service operated by the Samurai guys that links a human readable name to that payment code. So Nyms are centralized. BIP47 not centralized.
Yes.
Boom.
Very important distinction there. Yeah, so be aware of these tools, be aware of this escalation that is happening right now. I mean, you just look in the last week, you had the Inflation Reduction Act pass Congress. Looks like I think it got written into law this week. That adds 87,000 IRS agents to the IRS. The IRS's force. They're armed. People are posting job listings on the IRS site that are looking for people who are willing to use deadly force if called for. So the IRS are armed and looking to kill tax slaves who do not comply with what they are asking for.
Or even the ones that do comply, but like even if you like a complete law-abiding citizen pays all the taxes they're owed like a good citizen should, and they still get fucking destroyed in an audit situation. It's fucking insane.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, again, I think we said it last week, but late stage empire stuff happening here in the United States. When the state gets desperate and starts to lose control, they double, triple, quadruple down and try to maintain that control by using force. This addition of 87,000 agents to the IRS's force is a perfect example of that. I mean, whether you like them or not, I think it's pretty clear that the FBI targeting of Donald Trump this week, it was a bit odd. It seemed to be politically motivated. And then you have the sanctioning of Tornado Cash all within 7 days. And so whether it's this current administration or just simply the federal government doing what it does and being administration and party agnostic and just continuing to amass power and control, it's happening right now. These people have lost their minds. They're coming after you. They're coming after us. They do not view you as a citizen, as a sovereign individual. They view you as a tax slave who is to be controlled and wrung for every penny that they can get from you. And now they don't want you to be able to transact throughout the economy with privacy. And like Matt says often and said earlier in this rip, like privacy is a human right. Like just think of how insane it is that the government is actively trying to take privacy away from its citizens here in the United States, which is supposed to be a free country. But as we all know, we don't live in a free country right now. Hopefully we get back to it with the FBI raiding Donald Trump's house down in Mar-a-Lago. That's another thing. So like it seems like the balkanization theme in the U.S. is becoming more prominent as well as the state begins to clamp down. I mean, you had the attorney generals of, I believe it was Missouri and Florida, write letters to the FBI. I think Florida's mulling over whether or not their state legislator should pass a law that makes it illegal for federal agents to harass Florida citizens. Again, the state of Missouri, I think their attorney general wrote a similar letter to the FBI. And so it seems like states are seeing what's going on at the federal level and are reacting, which is what you want to see. That is what gives me hope as an American citizen, is that states are more and more, since the COVID lockdowns, beginning to assert their autonomy. And I think this escalation at the federal level, with the IRS agents being added and the FBI just being completely politically motivated, is really lighting a fire under the ass of states that do respect freedom and private property rights and privacy, to begin separating themselves from the federal government as much as possible. So it's going to be an interesting decade.
Yeah.
we're 2 years into it, or 2.5 years into it, and I think the next 7 years and 4 months are going to be well documented in history books and studied for centuries to come. This is the inflection point decade that we find ourselves in, and it's not going to be pretty.
100%. I mean, like there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, uh, freedom isn't granted; it is taken and defended. If someone is granting you so-called freedom, you're their subject. You don't actually have freedom. That's an important thing I think that people need to keep in mind as all this unfolds. The second thing is I forgot to put it on the list, but putting on my skeptic hat or conspiracy hat. There was 2 days ago, Reuters, which is like as establishment as corporate media gets, posted an article about Iran doing their first cryptocurrency import deal. And they alluded to the fact that they use cryptocurrency to evade sanctions. They don't say what cryptocurrency was used. They don't say what they imported with the cryptocurrency. It was kind of vague, but it all kind of happened at the same time as this tornado cash shit, which is really interesting to me. And then the second part of my skeptic hat is I will say, first of all, that's the first time a former president has ever had a search done by the federal government after they've left office. So regardless of your politics, it's very notable no matter what. But, that is an ideal way for Trump to launch his campaign. I don't know if that's connected or in any way or anything, but I mean, he had that fucking campaign ad that he released right afterwards. It's literally like ideal situation. So whether I'm not necessarily insinuating because I have zero fucking proof that he was involved in that, but if the plan was to try and stop him by doing it, then his enemies are just fucking idiots. Because that is like the single best thing he could have to launch with enthusiasm into his campaign run here.
Yeah, no, and Kita brings up a theory that has been floating around, which is that they're trying to egg him into announcing before the midterms, because obviously here in the United States we have midterm elections coming up this fall, and the consensus is that the Democrats that are in control are going to get completely wiped out. And the theory is if Trump announces his campaign for 2024 before the midterms, that'll spook a bunch of voters who sit closer to the center of the aisle to vote Democrat in preparation for that. So that could be the tactic that's being employed here by those in power right now.
Maybe.
Yeah. And again, like I don't think.
I still think if I was him, I'd 100% announce off of this shit. He's basically already announced.
He's too old. He did Operation Warp Speed.
I'm not saying I support him. That's for sure.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying you are either. But for those who think Trump is a savior, I don't think
he is definitely not.
No, I think he's just a narcissist that likes being in the spotlight. But yeah, he doesn't really respect civil liberties. Yeah, he came out. This actually went under the radar too. It was a couple of weeks ago. I remember retweeting it. He came out and like openly called for like censorship at the protocol layer of the internet. Like,
does not surprise me.
Yeah, so he's not going to save anybody. These politicians aren't going to save you. The federal government isn't going to save you. What I really want to see, that would actually be the ideal scenario, is that Trump, because any international freaks who aren't really privy to the American political landscape right now, the rumblings for 2024 presidential campaigns on the Republican side, it's either going to be Trump or DeSantis. It seems like Trump is dead set on running, even though he's very old and has been run through the mud for the last 5 years. But that would actually, in my mind, be an ideal scenario if Trump did run. Who cares if he wins or not? And then that forces DeSantis to focus on really making Florida as autonomous as possible and leading the charge on the balkanization and the reassertion of states' rights over federal mandates. So that could actually be a blessing in disguise.
More local governance.
Yes.
Local governments are more efficient, less corrupt. Localism, localism, localism. When I say citadel theory, I don't mean like a castle in the fucking mountains. I mean local governance.
Even though Matt has 2 Citadel dispatch castles, one in front of him, one behind
I
him.
wore a different hat this time though.
The what was I going to say? Yeah, you had the Coin Center comments on this sanctioning. Is there anything particular in here? I was not able to read it yet.
No, I mean this is a perfect example of priorities realigning, right? I think Coin Center, like people can give them a lot of shit for a lot of different reasons. They've always been relatively good on the privacy side. I've always personally supported them because of their work on the privacy side. Knowing them, my expectation is all hands on deck on the privacy side now. Everything else they were doing is being dropped. I hope that's the case. I think them getting this out really quickly is evidence of that.
Yes. No, I mean, they've been very impressive in terms of really fighting for digital cash being something that is a human right and privacy as well. So hopefully this realigns their motives to focus on the important stuff, security, privacy, and private property rights over protecting what many are deeming as unregistered securities. So I think again, this is a scary situation. It's a bit heavy, but pressure creates diamonds, freaks, and
yeah,
more pressure.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
The more pressure, the better the tooling and the robustness that the networks get.
I think it was delightfully ironic that this has been a narrative we've seen for years from Bitcoiners, public Bitcoiners, which is this idea that like the SEC should go after Ethereum for being an unregistered security and other shitcoins. Something I've always wholeheartedly disagreed with. Very few things that are more weak in this space than advocating for governments to intervene in these systems. And I mean, yeah, but it was kind of hitting like a fever pitch. It was like the highest that I've seen that advocation happening. And then right as that happens, the government fires a shot on Ethereum, their number one privacy tool. And most of those Bitcoiners that were outspoken saying that they wanted to see government intervention here, shut the fuck up. And that was, like I said, delightfully ironic.
Yes. Yeah. Just do not. Yeah. The calls for enforcement are pretty weak. Just build. Like, and I think you said, like, you may have tweeted it out earlier this week or something, but like, Bitcoin is it doesn't need to be, like, doesn't need the SEC to come down on Ethereum and what many are deeming as unregistered securities.
Yeah, have some conviction. Like Bitcoin will win in the open market. And we want to see open markets. We want to see open competition, and Bitcoin will win.
Yes. As we're finding out this week, it seems to be less of a low-hanging fruit than the Ethereum ecosystem. So be aware, staying on the tip of the U.S., flexing their ability to arrest people. They are extraditing BTC-e's founder. He got caught. Did he get caught in Greece, or he's in Greece? I thought he got caught.
Yeah. Okay. So this story is fucking awesome, Marty.
He got caught in his boxers.
No, the freaks have to. I have to repeat the story. I've said in the past. He was a known entity. He was operating out of Russia. U.S. and their allies couldn't reach him. He goes for a vacation in Greece. American ally. The Americans realize. Now, when we talk about digital encryption, the security is best at rest. The security is best when your computers and your digital devices are off. So when they got Ross for Silk Road, they got him in a library while he was signed into Silk Road and signed into his laptop. So they were able to run in and get access to everything when they did it. So they wanted to do the same thing for this guy. And so what they did was they drove a fucking unmarked car through his vacation home's gates. And the guy ran out in his like robe and boxers to scream at whoever the random person who was that did it. And it turned out to be agents. And they arrested him and they went upstairs and he was signed into his computer. And BTC-e was at that point was one of the longest running exchanges, specifically without KYC. So they were around since the Mt. Gox era. And this particular case happened about 5 years ago. And they finally were able to extradite him to America. Took them surprisingly a long amount of time to do that.
A very long time. And I imagine that's just because Greece is a very unorganized country. They don't have much political stability down there in that part of the Mediterranean.
But anyway, freaks, if someone drives a car through your gate, just make sure you turn off all your computers before you run out in your boxers.
Sage advice. Sage advice. Continuing down the regulation rabbit hole, Wall Street Journal posted an article this week that highlighted the regulators are weighing whether or not they're going to ask hedge funds to report crypto exposure. Either the SEC or CFTC would expand scope of using a confidential form, and I believe the AUM of these funds would have to be larger than 500 million. They'd have to disclose their holdings in the fund, which I actually would have assumed they already had to do that. But
yeah, I mean, I put this more in there for, I mean, obviously, like, I don't think most freaks care what $500 million and greater hedge funds are required to do. But I put that more in there because I feel this narrative coming on, right? Where, our traditional financial system, the fiat system, has built up this house of cards that has just been waiting to implode for fucking years, decades. And it's going to implode at some point. Like, I have expected it to happen sooner and have been incorrect, and I will own that. But it will happen eventually. And there's been a narrative among Bitcoiners since almost like for years, I've heard this from Bitcoiners, is that Bitcoin will be blamed when that collapse happens. And I actually really discredited it to a degree. I was like, I don't really think that is going to happen where Bitcoin gets blamed for it and people actually believe the bullshit. But this kind of move is like a move in that direction, right? Which is a move that's like, okay, like the financial system blows up and they say, oh, well, there was all these levered hedge funds that were all intermingled with the quote unquote crypto ecosystem. And as a result, like Bitcoin brought down everything we had built and you should blame Bitcoiners. And so I think it's very relevant from that perspective.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I would not have thought that was a step in that direction, but that does make sense. They're going to try and blame Bitcoin, but we must always remember Bitcoin was created as a solution to the instability and the fragility of the fiat monetary system and the financial system that's been erected on top of it. So they're going to try and blame Bitcoin. We can't let them. That's why we come here every week to remind you freaks and anybody who may listen to these recordings in the future that Bitcoin is a solution to this problem. The problem is wholly created by the architects of the fiat monetary system, the political system, the financial system that has been erected on top of this, and you cannot let them blame Bitcoin. And so
it's like blaming the lifeboats for sinking the Titanic.
Yeah. No, and like in that same vein, BlackRock, that was the big news yesterday. They announced, or they just turned something on their back end that is going to allow their clients to access Bitcoin via private trust. And so it seems like BlackRock, the largest asset manager on the planet, $9 trillion, I believe, in AUM.
I thought over 10 trillion.
I think with the downturn over the last, over the first part of this year, it's fallen below 10 trillion. Funny enough, you freaks will get a kick out of this. I actually got dinner with a good high school buddy of mine last night who works at BlackRock. We were talking about everything going on there, and he reads The Bent and listens to this content. He's inside being like, yeah, maybe you're right. So it's there are some fifth column actors in BlackRock as well.
BlackRock can go fuck themselves. This is definitely notable. I mean, we talked about last week.
Are the institutions here? Can we finally put that?
The institutions are already here, and they got wrecked. I've been thinking since the Coinbase partnership last week that we talked about. Obviously, this is a Bitcoin product. It's meant to give you exposure to Bitcoin's price movements. It is obviously custodial. You have none of the sovereignty benefits, but they seem to be offering it to their clients. This is kind of what an ETF might presumably offer that doesn't exist right now. So BlackRock sees a vacuum to a degree. But I was thinking about our conversation last week about Coinbase and BlackRock partnering for their Aladdin, I don't know, software suite or whatever you want to fucking call it for integration there for easy Bitcoin trading. And they said starting with Bitcoin first, like it is really convenient timing for the ETH proof of stake switch. And, maybe I think BlackRock might be gearing up to be a major staker on the network.
Well, yeah, I mean, I said it last week too, and the way I could see this playing out is they open up the spigots with Bitcoin. That's one thing they have in this private trust. They're comfortable offering it to their clients because they deemed that Bitcoin mining industry is ESG friendly. People should not be celebrating that. It's falling prey to a trap they're setting for you. But yeah, you open up the spigots to Bitcoin first, and then you offer something like Ethereum. Ethereum transitions to proof of stake. They can amass a large supply, being a $9 trillion asset manager, begin staking, and then slowly begin changing the narrative against POW if the mining industry does not evolve in a way that they see as beneficial to the environment. I think it's a classic bait and switch that could be playing out right now. They just open it up for Bitcoin. They're like, yeah, we're Bitcoin friendly. ETH goes to POS. They begin favoring ETH over Bitcoin because of the quote unquote environmental impact. And then at some point, I could even see them shutting off Bitcoin entirely if the mining industry does not meet the standards that they set.
Shutting off Bitcoin support on their platform.
Yes. Not shutting off Bitcoin, obviously.
I was just saving you from an out of context quote.
Yeah. The Canadian Bitcoiners are saying
Marty Bent says BlackRock's going to shut down Bitcoin.
No, but again, going back, everybody's like, yeah, look, this is proving that Bitcoin is ESG compliant. It's a trap, people. I posted a clip from my panel on ESG at the Bitcoin conference earlier this year. And I would just like to echo what I said on that stage in May, or April, whenever the hell the conference was, which is nothing is ever going to be good enough for them. They cannot control Bitcoin. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about the Bitcoin mining industry's energy mix. What they really care about is the fact that they can't control it right now. They're just playing coy and saying, hey, if the Bitcoin mining industry uses more renewable energy, we'll give it the okay. But at that point, Bitcoin, or at some point, even if Bitcoin mining uses 90% quote unquote renewables, they can begin to say, hey, you guys are taking that electricity away from other more advantageous endeavors. And on top of that, the mining industry is allowing all these transactions to go through in a peer-to-peer fashion, which we don't like. So we're going to use the S part, the social part of ESG, to begin trying to force miners to censor transactions. So do not celebrate that BlackRock has labeled Bitcoin mining as ESG friendly. That is falling prey to a narrative attack in the future.
The only thing we should be celebrating with this BlackRock news is shout out to us for front running the largest asset manager in the world.
Let's go, freaks. Not
every day you can say that.
Yeah. One of those big engagement accounts tweeted out the video of, which is like an interesting social indicator, but it's from a couple years ago. They presented it like it was an interview that happened yesterday or the day before. It was BlackRock CEO Larry Fink having a conversation with Mark Carney, who is one of the most evil bankers on the face of the planet. In that conversation 2 years ago, he highlighted that BlackRock clients were searching Bitcoin at orders of magnitude higher rates than things like COVID and ESG investing, I believe. So I think there is demand from individuals out there to get access to Bitcoin. A lot of them have been waiting for the green light from regulators. But what I would stress to any of those people who are waiting on the sidelines is do not acquire Bitcoin via BlackRock, and do not be afraid about acquiring Bitcoin before it gets the regulatory green light. There's millions of us out there who have been stacking for years with no problem.
I just want to clarify real quick. We have Narwhal Tacos, Ride or Die Freak in the comments asking if there's any word on whether BlackRock will allow Bitcoin withdrawals. Almost certainly not, but haven't seen confirmation. Everything I've read says no withdrawals. You're not allowed to withdraw. It's a purely custodial financial product.
Yeah, I don't see why they would ever allow that. They're an asset manager. They manage assets on behalf of clients. They wouldn't be managing those assets if they're allowed to be taken off their platform. So, yeah, I don't see them ever opening up the ability to take Bitcoin off of BlackRock's platform. Yeah, they could amass a. Yeah, that'll be interesting too. Like, are they actually going to be buying on the back end? Like, what is this exposure?
Well, that's what's nice. That's what's nice about nice. I mean, that's we talk about broken incentives a lot, and that's a major issue, right? On the Ethereum side, on the proof of stake side, it's a serious issue. In Bitcoin, if BlackRock or another custodial entity accrues a large amount of coin, having more Bitcoin does not give you more control of the network at all. You get no extra influence, no extra control. You can't make any changes. You can't choose what transactions get included in the block. On proof of stake, that's different. So presumably, an Ethereum version of this product would have BlackRock custodying everything, and then BlackRock staking with it as well. I would imagine the market would push them towards giving a portion of that reward to their end users, but ultimately they get the full 100% part of the influence that comes with being a large staker on the network.
Yes. Have fun with the merge. Ethereum stands. Congrats. You played yourselves. Moving on, this is actually really exciting news. In the hardware space, a company called Tropic Square, which is backed by Trezor, or financially backed by Trezor.
It's basically Trezor.
Yeah. They're
might as well just be Trezor.
They announced that they're going to launch a prototype for an open source security chip, a secure element, and this would be very much welcome, particularly for Trezor. I mean, that's one of the big things with the big knocks on Trezor right now is the fact that the secure element that they're leveraging isn't really open source. People don't have too much insight into that. We had the volunteer firefighter bell going off in my town right now, so I'll let you extend this conversation while that goes on. Comrocket.
So that's interesting you bring up Comrocket. I didn't expect you to say that right before you muted yourself. Yeah, so Tropic Square is something the Trezor guys announced a couple of years ago, I think, at this point, but they're finally going into production. Open source secure element, open source secure chip. They're planning on providing it to anyone who wants to use it. The main first use case is obviously going to be Bitcoin hardware wallets, hardware signers, but ultimately they seem to be saying that they're open to many different uses for this chip. So it's good to see the more secure chips available, more options, better. The more open source chips, even better, right? So It should be interesting to see what happens here, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in production.
They're coming for me, Matt. It's still going off. They haven't found me yet. They don't know I'm on the back deck, so it could be going on for a while. But does this change? Would this change if this gets released and
Narwhal's right.
does prove to be a viable option? Does this change your impression of Trezor as a hardware device at all?
I mean, I would like to see Trezor have a secure element on it. Ideally, it would be nice to have an open source secure element. So I would say yes. I mean, so when we talk about this, why does that matter? That matters because if you use a hardware device, the way to conceptualize what a hardware device does is, and this is not exactly what it does, but just imagine it's a safe around your seed phrase. Your seed phrase is your secret words. It's a safe around your seed phrase and the safe is protected by the pin. Okay. If you don't have a secure element, there is no safe around the seed phrase. Now, Trezor gets around it by telling people that you should add a passphrase, and the passphrase is an additional word that you create that's on top of the seed phrase. The seed phrase is your backup words, your secret backup words, whether those are 12 or 24 words. The passphrase is the 13th or 25th word. So for someone to compromise you, they would have to get your seed and then brute force your passphrase. But as it stands right now, pulling that seed off of the Trezor is a very relatively easy and cheap thing to do. And what you want to see is those hardware signers be very difficult to pull that seed off, regardless if you use a passphrase or not. And that's basically where the secure element comes in. The secure element is that's safe around your backup words.
Yeah. So this would be a much welcome development for Trezor users. More things we'd like to see with Trezor is the ability for people to interact with their Trezor without having to connect directly to Trezor servers. They have the suite now, and it seems like they're moving in that direction. There are software projects out there like Sparrow and others that enable you to connect to your full node with your Trezor, but Trezor doesn't offer that themselves yet. And I spoke to one of Trezor's product managers in the comments a few months ago, and I think that is on the roadmap too. So this is very good developments happening around Trezor in these regards. So it'll just bring more security and privacy to Trezor users, which is what we like to see here. Easy inbound liquidity using voltage. I know DJ, who's building.
This is awesome.
Has been building stuff for us for years. He tested this out and said it worked flawlessly. I haven't used it myself yet, but one of the problems when you're using the Lightning Network is getting inbound liquidity in a relatively easy fashion. And Voltage has brought a product to market that seems to be one click, and you get 500,000 sats of inbound liquidity.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So what is that right now? It's like $100 of inbound liquidity.
Yeah.
Look at that sats math.
What are you taking from this? Voltage, if you freaks are unaware,
it's nice.
Helps you run Lightning Network infrastructure in the cloud.
Look, we talk about the convenience versus privacy security trade-off. We talked about it earlier today. Voltage has an interesting trade-off balance there, where it's relatively convenient to use, but also relatively secure and private. It's not as good on a secure and privacy scale as if you run your own node. But Voltage makes it extremely easy. I think the trade-off balance is great. And the big thing they were missing was that it's a real headache trying to, you're onboarding a merchant. You don't want them to use a centralized service provider. So you say use your own BTC Pay. Now it's really easy to set up a BTC Pay on Voltage, but if they want to start accepting Lightning payments, they need inbound liquidity. And so first Voltage offered Flow, which is a UI interface on top of Lightning Pool to get inbound liquidity in an open market where you're basically paying people that are offering inbound liquidity to you to to get that inbound liquidity. So they made that easier interacting with that liquidity pool. And now they made it even easier where if you just start up, you just press the button and you're going to get that, $100 worth of Bitcoin to start receiving. You're obviously going to have to do some liquidity management after that. I mean, if you're any kind of successful business, you're going to need more than that. But it's a really nice first step when you're onboarding someone and they're getting more comfortable, I think.
Yeah. And 500,000 sats is probably around $120 right now. So,
ooh,
even more liquidity.
The other day I got caught doing my Sats math on 50K Bitcoin.
Oh,
I've been anchored. I get anchored very easily. Matt always gets anchored. I'll probably get anchored on 20K right before we start pumping. So in the beginning of the pump, I'm just going to be anchored in the opposite direction.
Well, you are anchored there already. That's what you just did, 20K.
I know, that was good, right? It's good Sats math. It was quick.
Yeah.
No one cares about the extra $20, Marty.
You need to plug your block clock back in so you don't have these problems.
We have multiple block clocks plugged in throughout the park, so I'm reminded.
The one in the cafe is not connected to the internet. I just want to make all the freaks aware of it.
It is now.
It's good to know. This was cool to see. I mean, obviously Block has postured publicly that they want to get into the hardware wallet space. They're a hardware company at heart with their Square point of sale systems. That's how they started as a company. And as they venture further into Bitcoin, it makes sense that they would try to bring a hardware product to market too. And so the individual who's leading that hardware wallet initiative at Block, I forget his name off the top of my head right now. Ryan Landman. He posted a blog post, wallet.build/losing-your-keys-without-losing-your-coins.
Why are you reading that?
I don't know. I just felt like it. So just an interesting blog post that gives you some insight into how the Block team is weighing the trade-offs of security and accessibility as they're building this wallet. It seems like they're not big fans of seed phrases. I think that's a big UX problem.
Yeah, so I mean, let's unpack this a little bit. They're pretty much going in the direction that we've theorized in the past on Rabbit Hole Recap. Essentially, what they're looking to do is a 2 of 3 multi-sig model. One key is a hardware key that they're developing and they're going to open source, which is basically supposed to be a very cheap, very, very cheap, like in the $5 to $10 range hardware wallet that interacts with your phone using NFC, similar to what the Sats cards and the tap signers from CoinKite are doing, but even cheaper than them. So you have one key on the hardware device. You're holding that yourself. You put that in your sock drawer or something. You keep that safe. Then you have another key on your phone, and then they have the third key. So for your day-to-day spending, you set up your wallet so you have spending conditions. As long as I spend less than $50 per payment and $500 total per day, just go ahead and sign that. So you don't actually need to use your hardware key. You just use your phone, and then their server just auto signs it if it makes those rules. Now, it is non-custodial, so at any moment, if they stop doing that, or if they try and shotgun KYC you or something like that, then you can use your hardware device, fish it out of your sock drawer, fish it out from underneath your mattress, fish it out from your safe, and then use that to recover your funds and move your funds off of the wallet because you have 2 of the 3 keys. Now, Marty mentioned they don't like seed phrases. What are they doing for the backups? Well, first of all, that app on your phone has one key, right? How do they back that up? They do a cloud backup that is encrypted with your hardware device. So you lose your phone, you take your hardware device, you reinstall the app on your phone, you sign into Google or Apple Cloud, you pull that encrypted backup down, and you decrypt it by tapping it with your hardware wallet. That is very sound from a security perspective. Google or Apple, even though they have full access to your cloud, aren't able to decrypt it because it's connected to your hardware device. You lose your hardware device. Well, you order a new hardware device, and then you use your app, you use their server, and you reinitialize a new hardware device in that situation. Now, the only issue I have with their setup is this third situation, which is they that app key, they do two backups. One backup is encrypted with the hardware device, like I just said. The second backup is encrypted with a key that their server has. And their idea is if you lose your phone and you lose the hardware device, they can help you recover. As long as you have that backup, they can help you recover both of the other keys. And the problem is they think it's resilient enough that Apple or Google has one element of that secret and they have the other element. But to me, that's just a recipe for failure. I don't like the idea that two of the major tech corporations hold part of the secret, and all it takes is two tech corporations to collude to hurt you. Now, everything has trade-offs. I do like that they're thinking about a different trade-off balance. They even say in the beginning, they're like, there's plenty of options if you want to be a complete self-sovereign Bitcoiner and do it yourself. We're not trying to compete with that market. And then there's plenty of options, including themselves, that does full custodial KYC handhold. And this is supposed to be like the middle ground. But what I would say is I would like to see that one piece removed personally. Like if I was asked for feedback, my feedback would be remove that one aspect where the app key is stored in the cloud and can be decrypted by their server. I don't, that part kind of turns me off. But the other aspects are actually like, it ends up in a very clean, very relatively strong trade-off balance for a lot of people. I think a lot of people, it would appeal to them, and it would mean more self-custody and less KYC, because I think in that type of situation, and we've seen it with Casa already, they don't have custody, so they shouldn't have to do KYC on you. And that all of a sudden opens it up to a global audience, reduces friction, and puts users at less risk because they don't have private information with them.
Yeah, well, lucky for you, they're asking for feedback and included an email address in the post, so you can email them your feedback.
I just provided the feedback.
Yeah.
But I guess freaks, if you want to provide your own feedback, feel free to email them. And if you want to email them this clip, you can email them this clip.
Clip it. Yeah, no. Again, optionality is something we talk a lot about here, and this just seems, if it's successful, like it would expand the options that exist for individuals out there. And as Matt explained, this is a unique trade-off balance that many people probably would find appeasing in terms of securing their Bitcoin. So get your feedback out. We've linked to that blog post in the show notes, and we're going to pause here briefly to go to shoutouts. We have 3 this week. First one, short and sweet, like the short and sweet ones. Stay humble and stack sats. It's always a good reminder. Freaks. Stay
Likewise,
humble.
freak.
Second shout out. This is a book recommendation from me. Marty, I'm pairing this donation with a book recommendation. How the World Really Works, the science behind how we got here and where we are going. It's a great book to fill in some of the gaps of understanding on how important fossil fuels are to us and why we are not going to be able to transition anytime soon. I'm hoping at least to feed you some additional relevant facts to fuel your arguments rather than conspiracy theories. I don't know that I've really been running on conspiracy theories, but $50 is nothing compared to what I owe you both of you guys. I have learned so much, and now because of the show, I run 2 nodes, have cold storage, and I'm learning how to coin join. Thanks, guys, for what you do. Longtime freak. Shout out to you, freak. Thank you for the book recommendation. I am going to pick that up.
Yeah, thank you for the book recommendation. Thank you for the support. I will check it out as well. I'm glad you find the content helpful. That is the main reason we do this week in, week out. And I just, on the topic of books, I just want to say, Marty, this is the Mandibles playbook is just happening right now. Everything, it's just the Mandibles.
I think I'm actually going to have to read Mandibles soon.
We're watching in real time.
They spun up a bunch of IRS agents in Mandibles too.
Yep.
Yeah. Mandibles.
They actually, Mandibles, they actually had people go door to door to take gold from people. Gold cups, gold bars, gold watches.
You're not getting my wedding ring. This is 24 karat gold from Mene. You're not going to take this from a government.
Oh, I also have a Mene wedding ring. Represent.
Shout out Mene. Disclosure: the founder of Mene is the chairman of the board of Cathedra, which I also said.
It's all so incestuous.
That book again is How the World Really Works: The Science Behind How We Got Here and Where We're Going. Last shout out. This one is a bit annoying, but Baxter, bark
Come rocket.
Milwaukee. I'm not. By the power vested in this shout out, you must hereby bark 21 times. Bark, 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 bark. May Satoshi's blessings be upon you. May the hash gods ever smile upon your ASICs, and may your descendants frolic in the bountiful fields of your eternal sap-fueled abundance. Sincerely, the humble plebs of Milwaukee's Bitcoin meetup, and the next meetup is 5 days from now on August 16th. So if you're in the Milwaukee area, freaks, and you're looking for a meetup, the Milwaukee Bitcoin meetup is congregating on the 16th. So think about going if you're in the area.
Do they have like a call? Like, where is there a website or something? I guess search on meetups.com.
Yeah, no website. Cars.
Was that 21 barks? I felt like it was short.
I feel like I read 21 barks.
Okay.
I have very good dexterity with my eyes, and I can follow along. As we learned with the hex code I had to read a couple years ago.
That was a great moment in RHR history.
I'm pretty sure I nailed that one too.
X-Frog saying it was 21. So I'm just going to trust him and not verify.
Thank you, X-Frog. X-Frog, the winner of our 10,000 sat bounty last week. I wound up paying that after the show. He did get paid out. For anybody who was listening and wondering if it did get paid, it did. It also made me question, like, all right, like you are just setting these bounties live on air, and then you're making me pay them, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if you were going to catch that. I guess it took a week.
No, I caught it right away. I figured I'd wait till we were on air again to bring it up. Note it, freaks. Note it. Put it in your journals.
Well, I do like the idea of just sporadic bounties for the people that are listening live. Like, I had multiple people message me that listened on the podcast, on their podcast app, and they were like, "Damn it, I knew the answer." I was like, you should have listened to it live.
That's a good way to get freaks in the live stream. We have a lot of people in the stream now. We've been hovering over 100 people tuning in live. It looks like we've got a porn spammer in the chat as well. Lovely.
No, it's the best adult dating site, it says.
We got spam bops in the comment section now. That's the live stream has made it. That's true, Yada.
It's pretty sad that it took us that long.
Yeah. Hey, low and slow. Consistency. We'll get there. We'll be very annoyed by the bots in a year from now. This is cool to see out of Peru. Motiv is launching 16 circular economies throughout the country of Peru. This is an NGO, and they've established educational material around this as well. So they're going to try to spin up these circular economies and then educate people of Peru about what Bitcoin is, how it works, why it's important. And this is important to see. A lot of people access the internet and their financial lives via their smartphones down in Peru. 80% of Peruvians are using smartphones. And so this is a good market to go into and begin getting Bitcoin tools in the hands of Peruvian communities. So shout out to Motiv. Never heard of these guys before.
Yeah, so I'm going to put my skeptical hat on. I mean, I put it on the list, but I'm going to put my skeptical hat on because we've never heard of them, and it seems like a really rosy press release.
Shout out Bitcoin.
But like, I want to say that I support these types of initiatives. This is what we need. We need grassroots, local initiatives to help people that are completely left behind by the financial system use Bitcoin in a very accessible way. So if there's even if there's like an ounce of validity to this, even if they only got one of 16 small town circular economies going, props to them. Love to see it. Bullish as fuck.
That's a win. That's a win right there. On to the data breach section of the show. A couple big ones this week. Twilio is a pretty massive one. There's so many services that use Twilio. They were compromised. For you freaks who are unaware, Twilio, it's a automated SMS service that allows companies to essentially automatically send messages to their customers in an automated fashion, automatically automated. And they got hacked, and I believe what got leaked, phone numbers. If you didn't have 2FA, no, that's what got leaked.
No, their employee didn't have 2FA, so they were able to access it. Twilio is so massive; they have 150,000. They have more than 150,000 corporate clients, including Facebook and Uber and Crypto.com. A lot of companies use Twilio. The data collected includes addresses, payment details, IP addresses, and in some cases, proof of identity. So this is a pretty massive compromise. And just goes to show once again that not only are trusted third parties security holes, but if your trusted third party is trusting other third parties, that's security holes on top of security holes, and it's a fucking issue. So when you provide information to these corporations, you should operate under the assumption that it will be compromised. Operate under that. Use burner phone numbers, use burner emails, choose not to use certain services that do not respect your privacy, and protect yourself, because these systems, the way they are set up, are extremely insecure, and we're just going to see leak after leak after leak fucking happen. It's extremely frustrating.
Yeah. So it seems that 125 of their clients have confirmed been affected by this. Again, these are corporate clients, though. It's not 125 individuals. It's probably 125 corporations, and Twilio's not announced what data was leaked specifically, but they do collect addresses, payment details, IP addresses, and in some cases, proof of identity. So they collect all that data. There's potential that the 125 clients of Twilio that were affected by this have had that data leaked, which means it's their clients' data as well. So
the really fucked up part about these things is like, okay, so on Twilio's side, we don't know what information was accessed. They didn't release that. We just can go off of what they collect, and so you got to just assume that what they collect was what was compromised. And then the second thing is, over and over again, and we'll see that with the next story we have on the list, is these third parties that get compromised, they'll say like, oh, 125 of our clients were included in the list, or the next one's 44 of our clients were included in the list, clients being companies. But then when as an end user, when you start looking out, it's like, okay, well, 125 companies were compromised, but like 10 have told their users. So that means there's, like 110 companies that have just got compromised via Twilio and just don't tell their fucking users. So the users aren't even aware that it happened. Now, there is a website called haveibeenpwned.com that if you put in your email address, they will let you know. And obviously, there's some trust there. Use a VPN when you put in your email address. Otherwise, Have I Been Pwned can link that to your IP address. If your email address shows up, email or phone shows up in one of these public breaches, they will notify you. And I've had many times where some of my emails or some of my phone numbers have been compromised, and I find out from this service before, or sometimes I don't ever find out from the company that created the compromise in the first place. Like, you get notified from this it's a separate channel. They're just checking darknet forums and whatnot to see what's for sale, and checking the breaches to let you know if any of your shit has been compromised. But just assume everything you give these companies is getting compromised.
Everything's compromised, which moves us to the next data breach, which was email provider Klaviyo, and that infected customers of 44 Bitcoin companies, including Swan. And so this is, I believe, similar to what happened to Unchained. This was an email marketing campaign software that was compromised. And what did they get?
Swan got fucking compromised on the last one too. And I wonder if they switched to this and then this one got fucking compromised, or if they were using both. But if I recall correctly, Swan got compromised by the HubSpot one or the other one of the ones that happened in the last few months. And here it is. It happens again. First name, email, IP-based geolocation data of customers has been what has come out. Also, at the same time as so they announced this breach. Klaviyo announced this breach, and I will say, in this case, 44 companies compromised. 44 Bitcoin and quote unquote crypto companies have been compromised. The only one I know of that has notified their users is Swan. So like Swan should get shit for trusting a third party, but Swan should get some props for at least fucking notifying their users. There's 43 other companies out there that haven't done that yet, as far as I'm aware. But one interesting little tidbit that's a little bit unrelated, but just it's crazy. Shopify also just announced that they invested $100 billion in Klaviyo. So it's like, just if you want to talk about incentives, like no one fucking cares about security and privacy. You can make boatloads of money just not taking it seriously.
Yeah. So beware, freaks. More data breaches out there. Just assume that everything has been compromised and act under that assumption. Moving on, though, this is cool to see. I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago, which is border wallets, which is a new way to create and easily memorize Bitcoin seed phrases using visual helpers. And it's just a cool project that will help people who need to escape particular areas and they don't want to bring any physical devices with them to quickly memorize their seed phrase and walk across a border and recover their Bitcoin using that seed phrase. And so Bitcoin Magazine has an article from MicroChad, wartime MicroChad, that dives into...
He's one of the maintainers of the project,
yeah,
for what it's worth.
Yes.
But it's a great article, good explainer.
Yeah, good explainer. I thought it was particularly this the example they included of a text message of somebody reaching out. This is embarrassing, but I need help. Police has seized stuff from the house I was staying in. It includes my ledger and a box, which is locked, which contained my 12 words. I don't have the 12 words. Is there anything I can do to ensure no one takes my BTC? So
that was actually a tweet, not a text.
That was a tweet. Yeah. So this is a product that is trying to help fix that problem. Easy memorization of your seed phrases. If you can remember that, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's crazy. I'll never forget the first time I recovered a wallet with a seed phrase. I was able to access Bitcoin. It was a mind-blowing experience. And the fact that we have this distributed sound monetary system that allows you to secure your wealth in the form of 12 or 24 words is still to this day blows my mind.
Yeah, so I mean, Border Wallets is a cool open source project. It's still very early. They have an online tool. Download it. Don't use it online. Use it offline. Don't use it with large amounts of money yet. Don't trust your memory too much. Like, people forget things all the time. I've lost coin forgetting things. I've lost access to encrypted hard drives forgetting long passwords that I thought I could remember. This is particularly useful, and I think they are very responsible about the way they have been promoting this project. For short stints, short times where you're like, okay, I'm crossing a border, or I'm doing this other thing, or I'm traveling or something, and I'm going to just immediately sweep it after I get to where I need to go. Obviously, memorizing things are easier in that situation. And just to make memorization easier, the way this project works at a high level is you're basically you're either printing out an image file, or you're storing it in a cloud storage or sending it to yourself on Signal or something like that, a grid of seed words. And what you're memorizing is the pattern that makes your seed phrase amongst that grid. So you still need to have the grid, and you can store that however you want to store that, because with just the grid, no one can access your funds. They need to know the pattern too. And the concept, it makes a lot of sense to me, is that a pattern is easier to remember than 12 to 24 words. So that's how it works. Pretty cool. Shout out
Yeah.
to the guys working on that.
Yeah, shout out to Wartime Micro Chad and everybody contributing to that. Last thing on the list, our friend Fiat Joff, he wrote a blog post within the last week, essentially criticizing the value for value model and saying that it is cool, but he doesn't really think that donations are going to be successful in the long run as a business model due to how complicated they can be, and is urging people to explore the long time activity of actually selling goods and services for a price. So applying this to content creators, we leverage the value for value model on this show via podcasting 2.0. We have, to an extent, you could say the shout outs are value for value as well. And the donations that freaks send on the website, if they read a bent and like it particularly, that's value for value as well. But yeah, Fiat Joff saying he doesn't believe that this is a viable business model at scale.
First of all, I respect Fiat Joff, which is why I included it in this list. I think he's a very unique thinker in the space, often very contrarian. I think he's a little bit off on value for value, and I think the freaks continue to prove him wrong week after week. We've seen a very great adoption on the value for value side. We get a lot of support from our audience, and I love to see it. I think it aligns incentives very strongly. But the key here is, like, these things aren't mutually exclusive. And I think as many tools we have available to content creators, but also to just like everybody in every industry, the more tools you have available to monetize and get back value for the time you put in, which is obviously the most scarce thing that we all have, which is time, short lives on this world. The more options, the better. And it's not mutually exclusive. People will try different models, and sometimes they'll try a combination of models. And a perfect example here is Marty. Marty has a value for value set up with the bent, where people can provide donations of whatever amount they think the bent is worth. But he also does certain issues where he has a paywall, and the paywall is basically what Fiat Joff is arguing for, right? So he has a combination of the two monetization schemes on a single project, being the bent. So some people will have combinations, some people will pick one or the other, and let the open market dictate how that proceeds.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's the beauty of Bitcoin too. You can experiment with both models. We are at the bent with the paywall, and I will say, I mean, Gigi's been giving me a lot of shit for caging my content behind a paywall, and
I hate paywalls.
But hey, it works seamlessly. It's only a quarter. I like to view it as like just put a quarter in a gumball machine. Instead, you're putting a quarter in a content machine and getting my stupid thoughts in return. But yeah, I mean, just subjectively looking at the data, I think I tweeted this out last week when Gigi last hopped in my mentions, making fun of me for caging my content. Is we've had the value for value donation model on the site for 3 years, and I think I've had 4 or 5 paywalled articles since I launched that, and we've already made more money doing that with 4 articles than we did over 3 years. Granted, I don't really utilize the value for value ethos correctly on the bent. I don't really like asking for money, so I'm not like highlighting that people can donate, and that could be a reason why it hasn't performed as well as the paywall has.
Yeah, I think I mean, people are still experimenting with how to make value for value work, but one constant one constant seems to be that, you know, people want to support people want to support things they find useful, but they need to be reminded often. And so you need to basically, not only do you need to remind them often, but you also have to reduce the friction for them to support you as much as possible. And I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why we've seen podcasting 2.0 be so impressive, is because it has been made as convenient as possible. Like it's going to be made even more convenient, but it's made significantly more convenient for someone to seamlessly donate and support while they're listening to podcasts, right? And you need to reduce that friction as much as possible while reminding people why it's important and how they can do it.
Yes, agreed. It's perfect segue to read the value for value boostergrams we received on last week's episode. Freaks who have been complaining about Fountain not aggregating the shoutouts from multiple different platforms. They do. It's just not where I've been reading the shoutouts from. I've been reading them from the episode details, and for some reason, Fountain hasn't enabled the interoperability with other podcasting 2.0 apps yet. However, it is available. If I just look at my wallet, I can see all the different podcasting apps that people are boosting from. And Oscar assured me earlier this week that they are going to be making it so I can see all the boostergrams coming in from different apps on the episode page. Hopefully next week we'll do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, right now, if I were to
it'd be nice to see it on the episode page, because I mean, it sounds like you can't see it unless you're running their custodial podcaster wallet right now, right?
Yeah, and that's not the reason why. It's just they're a 3-man team. They've been getting
priorities.
Yeah,
awesome. That's great news.
We did get some big boost last week for RIP 211. At Stimmy sent us a boost for 69,420 sats. Nice rip. At Daniel sent us a boost for 53,000 sats. Enjoyed. Thanks. At Patar, a regular booster. Thank you, Patar, for your ongoing support of the show. He boosted us 50,000 sats and had a comment on our Riot section last week when we talked about their demand response program. Riot selling their contracted power back to the grid is good for the consumer, because at that price there is no other options ready to load in real time. Think of it this way: if Riot didn't turn off, ERCOT would possibly be forced to shut off firm residential load. Would people have preferred a potential blackout to paying Riot for a couple weeks a year? I highly doubt it. Flexible load is the holy grail of grid balancing. And I agree.
Look, I mean, I agree too. I mean, that obviously, I don't think we disagreed with it last week. My point that I was trying to make last week is, you know, the grid should be better. I feel like it's also proof that the grid's fucking shit if they're overpaying Riot to turn off.
Agreed. And then on top of that, it's being upfront about what's actually happening. Like, they're getting paid.
Oh yeah, that too. They're like, oh, we're just saviors or whatever, but they're getting paid more money than if they were mining.
Yeah. He did add an addendum to that sat, since it was, or that boostergram, and since it was a 50,000 sat boostergram, I feel like I should read it. In addition, the other option to avoid load shedding is to build additional single cycle combustion turbines that sit there idle for 50 to 52 weeks of the year. 50 of 52 weeks of the year, aka peaking facilities. Paying Riot to reduce for 2 weeks a year is way more cost effective than building peakers for the consumers. I agree with that as well.
Agreed. And thank you for your support, Freak.
Shout out Patar, another steadfast supporter of the show via Boostagrams. At Auburn Citadel boosted us 49,497. Almost had it all over 50.
We almost had all over 50. It was suspenseful.
And I'm pretty sure Auburn Citadel is the one who predicted this too.
And then he broke his own prediction.
Yeah, he couldn't send 510 more sats.
He could have, but he wanted to make sure he got in under 50.
Yeah, and his boostergram is "Take it from this freak. The meat sweats are real." So I think he had the meat sweats last week when he boosted us.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Maybe that's why he couldn't add the extra 500 sats.
Yes, and so
Sweaty fingers. He tried, but
those are the top 4 boostergrams from RIP 211 of Rabbit Hole Recap. You guys can support the show via Podcasting 2.0 with Podcasting 2.0 compatible apps. And like I mentioned earlier, moving forward, hopefully after next week, we'll be able to aggregate all of the boostergrams coming in from the different apps that people use to access Podcasting 2.0.
My favorites being Fountain Podcast, Breeze Wallet, and Podverse.fm.
Yes. I think podcastingwallets.com has a list of Podcasting 2.0 compatible apps that you can download if you want to participate in the value for value model. We really love coming and doing the show week in and week out, and we love even more that you guys actually get value from this and feel so compelled to send some back to us. So thank you to everybody who supported the show.
100%. And also, just to add here, so like the way I view boostergrams is it's a strict improvement over the way we do shoutouts. With shoutouts, obviously, we're running a centralized web server plus BTC Pay to accept your shoutouts and accept your messages. With Podcasting 2.0, it's an open system. So you're able to send it from any Podcasting 2.0 wallet that's Podcasting 2.0 app that supports it. Those funds that you send are auto split between me, Marty, Carr, DJ, and open source development, which is really cool. Like those payments literally go directly to all of our respective wallets rather than going into a centralized wallet that we then have to split up ourselves. And then last but not least, it allows you to actually look up what other people have said in the boostergram. So if you're not one of the top 4, you can actually see all the other ones underneath it if you want to go read yourself, and you can verify that Marty is not censoring supporters. So you can actually verify what they're saying. So it's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. Again, shout out to you freaks. I mean, it's just, it's again, I mentioned how my mind was blown the first time I recovered a seed and got access to Bitcoin, but Podcasting 2.0 and how this works, particularly with the splits and the boostergrams, it's another mind-blowing realization of my Bitcoin journey, is just how powerful and innovative this stack is and what it can enable. And on the while I have it top of mind on the paywall side of things, the BTC Pay server Ghost integration, DJ has been working very hard behind the scenes cleaning stuff up. We're hoping that at some point in the beginning of next month, we'll be able to release all that code. We're going to open source it. And then we'll also have a centralized product for people who don't want to take on the burden of figuring out how to host everything and set it up themselves to sort of walk you through that process and help you with that as well. And so if you're running a Ghost site and you're looking to integrate Bitcoin using BTC Pay server, I believe he has an open node integration working as well. That'll be open source at some point in the beginning of next month.
Awesome.
Daniel Liegler coming in a bit late. What the fuck is Tornado Cash? Covered it in the beginning of the episode. You're gonna have to go.
No,
back.
But he might be in the beginning of the episode, because if people come in and go to the beginning, when they put in a comment, it pops in right away.
So you'll hear us talking shit about you when you get to the end.
Yeah. What's up,
Dan? Anything we have to riff on here at the end? We're like 2 hours in.
We had a great Nash Bitcoiners yesterday, talking about digital identity and privacy, which is fun. We have Rockstar in town. I walked out of a cool little workshop kind of support group that was running in the event space at the park right before this, that was talking about digital identity and privacy. So good times at the park. And he is going to be rotating his NYM on Saturday at the park.
Yes,
He's calling it a funeral, but I just want to be clear here: no physical person is dying. The NYM is dying.
Yes, Rockstar will be laid to rest this weekend on Saturday. Yeah, that being said, I had a good drinking session with a couple of Bitcoiners, a golfing session with a Bitcoiner over the last week, and it's always great getting together with other Bitcoiners and talking about
It
this
really
stuff
is.
when you can't nag
We
your wife.
actually, after this, we have. I wonder if usually they put on the stream in other parts of the park, so they might actually be listening right now. But like, we have a huge crew of Bitcoiners here that are at 5 p.m. We're going to. If you're in the area at 5 p.m. at the park, we're going to be doing a happy hour that's sponsored by Bitcoin Magazine. So that should be fun too.
You have an hour and 45 minutes to get to Bitcoin Park. Make it happen, freaks, if you're in the area. This is a good rip. A lot of heavy stuff going on out there, freaks. The war on privacy and on Bitcoin more generally is heating up. The federal government here in the United States seems to be getting more power drunk by the day. And there are people building to make sure that we can escape this despotic panopticon that they're trying to thrust on us. So while things may seem heavy, there is a glimmer of hope in this world that is Bitcoin. And there are a lot of people who are dedicated to strengthening the system and getting it into the hands of as many people as possible. And if you're here doing that, you're supporting the cause. And hopefully you take some of the information we shared here and go broadcast it and propagate it to people in your life.
100%. That actually reminds me, I see someone in the comments. Marty, a lot of ride or die freaks here this week that want to shout you out and give you some love. They're like, "Where's Marty? Why is Marty not here?" I was like, "Marty's here often. You got to just keep coming back." And I would just say that I also have 2 awesome interviews lined up on Citadel Dispatch. So if you search for Citadel Dispatch on YouTube or the podcast apps, on Friday I have Sid, the legend who drove his motorbike, his motorcycle across the country, going to all the different meetups in the morning on Friday, and then I have Rockstar himself the day before his funeral coming on Dispatch.
That'll be a spicy one. 2 good Citadel Dispatch rips coming up, freaks. I'm actually going to sit down with Preston Byrne to talk about all this Tornado Cash stuff and the legal ramifications of everything tomorrow morning.
One of my favorite lawyers in the space.
He's not our lawyer, but he is a lawyer in the space. So that'll be out on Monday. Love you guys. This is a good, very old school, dense bear market TFTC, or excuse me, RHR rip.
I fucking love it. Stay humble, stack sats, freaks.
Peace and love.